Good evening. It is about 10:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. I apparently have nothing better to do than to drink bourbon and answer a post on an NCO support forum and make a video. That is not actually the case, but it is. So I digress. Discussion going on about whether or not it is more beneficial to stay past 20 years or to retire right at 20, or even if it's worth staying to 20. And I've got a spreadsheet here that I designed. The first iteration of it was actually for myself. Um, I did my MBA at Rice University in Houston, Texas, when I was active duty. And one of the things, I had a personal goal that I wanted to make command sergeant major. I wanted to do some time, and I knew it was going to take me past 20 years. And what I had always heard was that every year you get 2.5 additional percent retirement, and that it's totally worth it because that adds to your retirement. And I started to realize in my MBA studies that that is about as false as it can possibly be. Unless you are planning on never working again, or you are not set up for gainful employment after the military, it costs you money to stay every day past 20 years. And I wanted to prove that for myself and to kind of make sense of it. So I built this spreadsheet, actually a previous rendition of the spreadsheet. And then several coworkers, worked in an embassy at the time, were very interested in figuring out if it was worth, and they were mostly senior officers, whether it was worth staying 3 or 4 more years to get '06 versus retiring as an '05. And every time we ran the model, it almost always cost them money to stay longer. So that's what brings us here today. So we've got someone on the forum. The original anonymous poster said 5 years and two dependents. Um, it's a little hard for me to model right now. I built this spreadsheet for the legacy retirement program because that's what myself and my peers were a part of. BRS is, well, it's really a bad deal. For those that have it, I really apologize that you have BRS unless if you stay to 20 years, that's where you really kind of get screwed with BRS. If you walk early, at least you have something to show for it. But for those that are in BRS, you better be maxing your TSP out and maxing the matching out because it is really not a better system. It was not designed with you in mind. It was designed to save the government in mind. So I will build a spreadsheet for that another day. But for right now, I'm going to actually take someone else. Brandon here said E7, 7 years active, 19 years exactly total combined. 3 dependents should hit E8 right at my 20-year mark. All right, so here's what I'm going to infer from that. I'm not going to infer that he's going to make E8 at 20-year mark because um, he may see it as a likely probability, but it also may not happen. We never know what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that Brandon here came in at 18 years old and will be 38 years old when he hits 20 years, and he will be in E7. What you see here is everything I'm inputting is in green. I've got tabs built down here, if you look on bottom, with everything from VA rating to BAH. I'm using non-locality BAH because I can't account for everyone's BAH code. And even you can't account for it if you're staying 3 or 4 more years in the military. You don't know where you're going to move. So non-locality is the standard I'm using. I will admit that my pay chart is still 2023's number. I have not updated that to 2024 yet. And that brings us to this. So 38 years old, E7. He's going to have 20 years. He's going to be with dependents for BAH rate. So here we're going to see his pay. You're going to see what he draws in monthly, his annual pay, his BAH annual, his annual clothing allowance, his base allowance for sustenance, his what that comes up to annually, and that's a total of what he earns pre-tax after. And you're going to see that not populate down here in the retire where you're at. So you're saying 38 years old, he retires, he has no active duty pay at that point. We're going to assume that he's drawing retirement pay, which is going to be exactly half of the annual pay that you see there. Here we've got our future numbers. So we're going to say that he wants to stay for his, he pins E8, um, right at the 20-year mark. So he wants to get his high 3. So he's right at the 20-year mark. So that's going to take him to, we're going to say 24. All right. Now I broke this up based on your natural pay raises in the military. Um, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I should probably match that better off to annual year. So that's an improvement that I need to make. So duly noted. His retirement age at 24 years is going to, what's going to be up 4 years. So we're going to be 42. He's going to be in E8, and we're still going to be with dependents. So that is what he is earning. So you can see that's about a $13,000 and change pay raise annually from when he was an E7. All right. Cost of living allowance, that's the basis that I'm using for a raise. When we average military payout, you're getting on average a 2% raise a year. It's not exactly that, it ebbs and it flows, but I've got to have one number. Historical data doesn't really matter in this because we're future casting. So we're going to use 2% as our baseline. So you'll notice that all of these retirement pays are increasing 2% above previous year every year. Some years that may be 5, some years that may be 1, but it's going to average out to about 2%. And you're going to see that over here for the future grade as well. So current grade E7, future E8. Um, Civilian job. This is what his annual salary is going to be. So this is what we're really going to play with. And this is where it really matters that you finish your degree, that you get your degree from a genuinely good school. That matters, especially here in the civilian side. Not all degrees are the same, and employers, frequently scrutinize where your degree's from. Now, federal government, not so much, but if you're splitting hairs on candidates and they're equally qualified, where you got your degree from may make a big difference. And then on the private sector, where you got your degree from makes a whole lot of difference. So annual salary, I'm just going to leave that at 100,000 right now. I'm going to use the same annual raise, 2%, that we're using for the military retirement, for the COLA. And then we've got VA. I'm going to arbitrarily give him a 70% rating. He said he is married and where we got married, 3 dependents. So I'm going to assume that means he's got 2 kids. So we're going to put him in the married plus 1. If you don't know what that means, you need to study your VA ratings and how they do the payouts. And we're going to do 1 extra child. So this is what his monthly VA stipend would look like for a 70% disability rating. When we come down here, we're calculating cumulative income here. So this is what your retirement pay, your active duty pay, which for retired now is 0, VA disability, civilian salary, that's your total income for the year. And then we get into your cumulative income and it just builds. All right. And when you start tracking this number, it starts to get pretty high over the course of your life. In this case, it's going to run till he's 86 years old. Okay. Not that he's going to keep working when he's 86, but we want to do that for a reason. You're going to see over on the other side. Over here, we have the exact same thing. Now, you're going to see zeros for retirement pay and you're going to see numbers for active duty pay because remember, this guy waited for some high years at E8. What we've got over here for cumulative income, it's going to turn yellow at the point where you finally made more money than this guy over here. All right. So, assuming 38 years old, E7, 20 years time in service with dependents, retires today versus 42 years old, waiting 4 years to get that high 3, 42 years, E8, or 42 years old, E8, 24 years time in service, still with dependents. All right. $100,000 a year civilian salary. This is where we come. We start running this. You will be 83 years old, 83 when you finally made more money by staying in. And that's with your increased percentage on retirement. Because if you notice, even on the first year retirement, you're getting 47,000 over here, you're getting 35,000 over here. All right. So you're calculating at a higher rate. Now, let's say that Brandon didn't do the right things while he was in. He didn't get a college degree. He didn't do well. And he decides to go be a Walmart greeter. So Brandon's living up his dream of being a Walmart greeter. He makes $30,000 a year doing this job. Well, now suddenly it pays to stay longer. Instantly, you see that number. He's got to stay in longer. because he didn't make the move. So if Brandon is at 20 years and he doesn't have a degree and he hasn't put himself in a position where he's marketable to the civilian sector, then he may want to consider staying and finishing that education, um, or doing certifications or trade skills or whatever to put him at a higher level. But let's just say, arguably speaking, he's middle of the road and he's $70,000 a year. Well, now it's 56 where staying in stays longer or pays more. Staying in longer pays more. You up that number a little more, we go to 80, and now you're at 64. So now you're getting close to an age where you're thinking about retiring for sure. Now, what we don't have over here on the current side is what you're doing for retirement on this side of the house. My original spreadsheet actually had that. I'm thinking about adding it in, but I'm also realizing that all people don't invest the same. So it's probably a little bit better to break it down like this and then say, hey, if you invest a certain percentage of your civilian salary, I don't know, say just a modicum of it at 2%, you are going to push this number out here decades just by doing minor bits of savings towards your retirement off your civilian salary early. So once again, this is just a base model. I think 80,000 for an E8 is pretty attainable, especially if you've done well in the military. I also realize that if you're going to somewhere remote, somewhere where there's not a lot of job opportunities, that you may not be able to achieve that, and that the economy around you may not support it. So in that point, this is something that you need to think about. If you can't get that higher paying job, maybe staying in is a better option for you. Um, Maybe you realize that, hey, you can get that, $130,000 a year job, but you got to be in DC to do it. In which case, the cost of living is absolutely insane, and you might be in a better position with that $80,000 job in Iowa versus that $130,000 a year job in DC. So these are all things you have to think about when you're looking at the finances. This is just a quick run through. I welcome any of your inputs on this because I definitely want to make this a little bit more user friendly so we can put it up on some of the NCO support forums, kind of get it around so people can actually use this as a tool. Um, but right now, this is where I'm at. Let me know what you think, and I will post this version of the file up in the file section of NCO support forum so you guys can play around with it. I will have all the cells locked, but plug your own numbers in, give me some feedback. I'll start a separate post for this, and we'll take it from there. All right. Hey, y'all have a good night, and pour yourself one, and have a happy Super Bowl tomorrow.